Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1.
The thinking atheist. It's not a person. It's a symbol. An idea.
The population of atheists in this country is going through the roof.
Rejecting faith. Pursuing knowledge. Challenging the sacred.
If I tell the truth, it's because I tell the truth. Not because I put my hand on a book and made a wish.
And working together for a more rational world.
Take the risk of thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way.
Assume nothing. Question everything. And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist Podcast. Hosted by Seth Andrews.
This broadcast is releasing right before the 2020 presidential election in the United States. So as I'm sitting here behind the microphone, I have no idea what the outcome is. Okay. But this broadcast is evergreen. It was relevant years ago. It's relevant now. It's going to be relevant in 2025 and beyond, because we're talking about our value systems, our philosophies, what's important to us, and when, if ever, it's appropriate to agree to disagree. And I'll be taking plenty of listener calls and getting your perspectives on this as well. It's ironic that I live in the United States of America. Can you think of a more ironically named place than the United States of America? We are already suffocating in the smoke of contradiction. The United States of America. Can you think of a place more divided than this place right now? I talk a lot about the Pledge of Allegiance. I wrote about it in my book. It's strange. I used to really hold to this idea that you put your hand over your heart and you stand up and you say the pledge. And I found myself on the reverse side of that, or the opposite side of that, because now I think this rote recitation, a Pledge of Allegiance to a country, is not really it's not a healthy thing. I think you can be loyal and you can love your country. Don't get me wrong. But if I'm going to pledge an allegiance, it's not going to be blind allegiance to a nation, right or wrong. It's going to be an allegiance to the truth, an allegiance to goodness. And my hope would be that my country would be on the side of goodness. This has certainly not been the case as of late. But in the pledge, there's this line before they added under God to the Pledge of Allegiance back in 1954. The line said, one nation indivisible, unable to be divided or separated, indivisible. People say the pledge in this country all the time, and they say with a straight face, indivisible. And yet we are, in fact, the divided states of America. That's what I call it in Confessions. And this romantic notion, we hear about it in songs all the time. And I get it. Come together. Let's all hold hands, hands across America. Stand together, hand in hand. We are the human family. We are the world. We are the children. You know what I'm saying? We're not deluded enough to ever think 300 plus million Americans and 7 billion people all around the world are going to ever hold hands in lockstep in unity for the sake of good, to be one shared humanity, right? It's this hopeful dream, this optimistic fantasy, but life is not a Coca-Cola commercial, okay? We know that. Our logical brains know that. Many times we are divided. And in those instances, we say something like, well, you know what? We just need to agree to disagree. Now, I'm of two minds on this. I go back and forth a little bit. And I think some of it, without being a politician, some of it does depend on context. A great example is if I'm in a conversation with my devoutly religious parents. We are at an impasse, but I would like to try to salvage the relationship however I can. So I say, well, let's agree to disagree on this, meaning let's put this on the shelf. Let's live around it and try to be a family despite our differences on this issue. That hasn't worked out hugely well, but there are some things we can agree to disagree on. A lot of those are preferences. I love Mexican food. Mexican food's terrible. We'll just have to agree to disagree. I like my coffee black. I like it with cream and sugar. I will have to agree to disagree. You know? Today's music sucks. Today's music's amazing. I think we're going to have to agree to disagree on that one. A lot of that speaks to preference. But when you get into our value system, what's important to us? What makes us tick? How do we treat other human beings? Agree to disagree becomes a hell of a lot harder. Agree to disagree becomes much more difficult when it comes to the things that really matter. I'm thinking about our recent history. Go back to the Civil War. Imagine if the North and the abolitionists had said to slave owners and those who were pro-slavery, well, you know what? For the sake of peace, we'll just agree to disagree on this one, and we'll just sort of keep on keeping on. Is that really the best solution? Like, you own another human being, and they are tortured and oppressed and enslaved by you. We'll just have to be content to agree to disagree. Of course not. That is a moment when division is actually the moral choice. Dividing, in that case, not agreeing to disagree, that was actually the better path. You think about the suffrage movement in the early 20th century. What if women had just said, well, yeah, we can't vote, and we're treated kind of like second-class citizens? I guess we'll have to agree to disagree. Or do they go out and raise some hell? Hold up a hand and say, no, I divide with you on this issue. I'm going to fight for what is right. I'm going to try to defeat your bad ideas. We will not put the ideas on the table and give them equal merit and say, well, you know, it's all relative. Everybody's got their opinions. You know, have you heard that one? I mean, you know what opinions are like. Everybody's got one, as if that's an argument. The First World War, the Great War, the Allied powers, they divide against the Central powers to help protect some oppressed nations being invaded throughout Europe. What if we said, you know what, we'll just have to agree to disagree on this one. I mean, you do whatever you're going to do, but, you know, we'll just have to table that for now. Or do you stand up and fight? Same, of course, against the Nazi and Japanese threat during the Second World War, the Allies rising up together. Now, granted, this was a great example of people uniting for a specific and good reason, but we were dividing against what we considered to be an egregious wrong. Dividing was the moral choice. The civil rights movement, imagine if Martin Luther King Jr., etc., had just sat around and said, well, we'll just have to agree to disagree that I'm not actually a human being. Dividing was the necessary thing to do in the moment for good to prevail. How many times have we seen an injustice done by a human being, an organization, hell, a nation? War protesters, what a great example. They see an injustice happening, Vietnam War, some of the subsequent wars. They divided, not just an opinion, but they actually rose up and physically divided against an egregious wrong, or what they considered to be an egregious wrong in their nation. They could have come together and shut their mouths for the cause of unity, but is that really unity? They could have kept the peace, but is that really peace? That's not peace. It's an absence of conflict, but it's not really peace. It's like you're at the dinner table, and you hold a diametrically opposing view in terms of religion, politics, philosophy, values, whatever, than, say, the rest of your family. And I know what this is like. You sit down at the table, and everybody else is yammering on about the stuff they consider to be important, and you decide you're going to keep the peace, so you say nothing. You don't interject, you don't give your opinion, you don't wax on, you don't make waves, you're keeping the peace. That's not peace. That's an absence of conflict. But it ain't peace. It's a type of surrender. You can agree to disagree. Well, okay, until we don't. Until you go after my friends and fellow human beings and allies and the things I consider most important in this world, then agree to disagree does not cut it. What if LGBT advocates had said, well, we'll just have to agree to disagree, that you think I am a sodomite and perverse and in league with the devil and don't deserve the basic respect and protections that any other human being gets to have? No, we'll just agree to disagree. Or is the right thing to actually divide in that moment and say, no, hell no. I got to fight for the things that matter. We want to live in an undivided world. I have the Coke commercial fantasy in my brain where we all buy each other a Coke and teach the world to sing like the old commercial. Wouldn't it be amazing? Wouldn't it be amazing if we, even as members of specific tribes that are perhaps reflective of common interests, etc., what if we remained always focused on the larger humanity, the larger tribe, the larger human condition? I pulled up the lyrics from Imagine, John Lennon's Imagine. I mean, it's a brilliant message. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us, only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. And no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, right? You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Wouldn't it be amazing if the world would one day live as one? It's a beautiful goal. I think it's something we should work toward, not because we'll ever get there, but because it's important we try to get closer. A more unified world is still better than a less unified world, but unified for the right reasons, not because we're all sitting on our hands agreeing to disagree when we're in the presence of theocrat activists who are trying to shame and blame us for every problem in the world and select for themselves the head seat at the big table and tell the rest of us that we have to beg for the scraps, to dehumanize other people, to harm other people in every sense of the word, emotionally, psychologically, financially, physically. We're supposed to agree to disagree. I am sorry. That's not going to happen. In the United States, we're two countries right now, at least two countries. There seems to be one side that is this sort of religiously informed, hardcore, xenophobic, like a culty nationalism going on, responding to authoritarians, presidents acting like kings, uncaring about much of the rest of the world. Because, to them, the United States is the world. They hold to the Bible they do not read or understand and use it as an excuse to cause real harm to other people. What do the rest of us do? Well, we think that we are citizens of the U.S., but also citizens of the world. We think that there is a moral responsibility to stand up for what is right, even if it means standing against your own government and peacefully protesting in the streets. This is not one nation that belongs to any specific religion. This is not a nation that should pride itself on othering people. We're tired of all the suffering. We're tired of all the marginalization. We're tired of the bigotry and the sexism and the racism. So we divide. We say, I stand apart from you on this. We will not just agree to disagree. I'm going to have to fight you on this. And I'm not talking about guns in the streets, but I'm talking about a fight in terms of values. Peaceful protest, getting active in our systems, active in our systems of government, waving the banners in front of the politicians so that we will not be ignored, perhaps even running for office, certainly trying to promote whichever political representatives don't wave the flag of bigotry and hate and racism, etc., who don't say that, well, their specific God with the proper name owns the whole thing, and the rest of us, especially the atheists, well, we got to sit around and wait for whatever they dole out to us, whatever they're kind enough to offer up, because we are essentially second-class or even third-class citizens. I'm sorry, I don't agree to disagree with you on this. I'm going to have to divide, and I'm going to stand up and fight you. With everything I've got, I'm going to stand up and fight you. What does agree to disagree mean to you? I've been having the discussion in my own brain. Certainly this has crossed your mind. When someone says, let's agree to disagree, what does that mean to you? I'm curious. 517. Who's this?
Hi, Seth. This is Reiner in Michigan.
Thanks for calling. All sorts of fun stuff going on in Michigan.
Yeah, we certainly have a group here that wanted to kidnap the governor. And we have a sheriff in what's called Berry County. His name's Dar Leaf. And I saw an article today where he said, well, if those guys were, trying to, quote, arrest the governor is not exempt from arrest. And then he cited some code. And that would be certainly someone that I would have to not agree to disagree with and be like, come on, man, you're making apologies for folks trying to overthrow the government.
So if we sit back and say, well, we'll just have to agree to disagree, we're essentially enablers because we're sitting on our hands and they're the proactive ones.
Yep.
I'm nervous about violence in the streets only escalating. I'm worried about incitement. I'm actually terrified about the state of my own nation in this tumultuous time. I'm sure you probably share that. But, my best to you, I guess we'll just batten down the hatches and do whatever we got to do to try to ensure that good prevails, okay?
Well, I'm hopeful that good will prevail. There's mostly good people, so I think we'll be okay.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate the call. 248. Hi, who's this?
Hi, Seth. My name is Alex, also from Michigan. I have actually wanted to call you for a while because of the comments you've made about people being woke and being mean. I guess a lot of people are realizing Michigan is not exactly a super nice state. I was born and raised here. I took offense to the fact that you guys are coming down hard on those of us that are very, very angry in our wokeness. And I wondered if you ever think there's situations that call for it. Like if you knew the whole situation, I think that some people have paid a higher price for being Christians than others have. Some have had very loving experiences with very little harm done. Some have had the exact opposite. And those things tend to shape our behavior, I'm sure. So I kind of wonder, have you ever thought about it from that point of view?
Well, let me respond to your question first with a question. Have you ever heard me say or even imply that we should not be even passionate and angry about the injustice that's happening?
I have heard you say that we need to be, yes. I'm not trying to be a bitch about it.
No, we're talking like real people.
I took offense
it's all good.
to it a few weeks ago.
Can you give me give me the context in which I said that we should not be angry about injustice?
You didn't say that at all.
Okay.
You said those that are woke, and I can't remember your exact wording, but you told us to stop, that we needed to stop. And that...
well, how would you define woke?
The online attacks, I guess. Online attacks, things like that.
How would you define woke or woke culture?
My definition of woke is knowing God's not real and that we're on our own. I know other people have different definitions, but that's my definition. I don't know the exact definition of what woke means.
Well, it's possible you and I simply are operating from different definitions of woke. I wrote about woke culture in the final chapter of Confessions, and the reason is because I think that injustice must be fought, but sometimes we allow ourselves to get derailed over non-issues. And I talk about things like when the college student posted the photograph of herself wearing the qipao, the Chinese dress, and people blasted her for cultural appropriation. That type of thing, this sort of faux outrage, this misguided outrage, that's what I'm speaking about. I also resist this notion that we are going to defeat the bad agents in this world by throwing milkshakes and even fists at them unprovoked. sucker punching Richard Spencer, certainly it feels good in the moment. When we watch the video, we're like, yeah, a Nazi took it in the teeth. I don't think that's how we change the world. So that's the position I operate from. I think ours is not.
But does it make us bad if we do celebrate it?
I don't think.
If we do celebrate Richard Spencer getting punched, are we bad guys?
I just think it's the wrong approach. That's a gift to Richard Spencer. Whoever punched him gave him a Christmas present, because everywhere he goes, he now gets to play the victim card. He gets to talk about those unreasonable people who just came out of nowhere and sucker punched him. They actually helped him to reinforce and re-rally his base. I just don't think we as reasonable people are going to change the world by sucker punching our way through it. If we
that may be true.
If we're physically threatened, we have every right to defend ourselves. And I understand there are people who lash out in moments of real desperation. They have been persecuted so horribly for so long. I'm not trying to minimize any of that. But I think ours isn't really a disagreement about being passionately angry about injustice and wanting to be advocates for our fellow human beings. We may have a little bit of a disagreement on tactics, but it sounds to me like you and I are largely on the same side.
I am way meaner than you are. I have a habit. I have a habit of calling people wastes of human flesh, and it doesn't go over well sometimes. I've learned.
All right, hang on, hold on.
In my lifetime.
So, in what context do you say to someone, "You are a waste of human flesh"? I'm just curious about it.
For example, I moved into where I'm living right now about 5 months ago, and my landlord's friend came over and was talking about shooting Antifa if they ever showed up at his door. And I went off on this guy. I mean, I literally went off. I'm like, you waste of flesh, piece of shit, and blah, blah, blah. You don't even know what Antifa means. And he said, what does it mean? I said, it means anti-fascist, you effing idiot. And he goes, what's a fascist? And I stopped and looked at him like, what? I said, a fascist is a Nazi. Antifa means they're anti-Nazis. He had no idea. And I'm like,
I get your frustration.
These are the people I'm surrounded by here in Michigan. There's Trump Pence signs everywhere. I'm in Troy. And, they're doing their rallies on the side of the street when I go to Myers. And, I've also shared with other people on other platforms that I am the birth mother of the twin girls for Denny and Mindy Thibault, the leaders of the Moral Outcry. And I'm watching their stuff. They do these church things at Grace Centers of Hope Church. And I was watching Denny talking about how he doesn't care if he's lying. It's just this whole, I know I'm sounding confused right now, but there's just this whole storm of insanity here in Michigan. And when you're trying to deal with these people, being nice doesn't work.
There is a misconception that if I don't walk in and say, you're a piece of human garbage and fuck you, etc., that I'm saying that we have to be nice to bigots. Okay, and that is actually, it's a straw man argument. It's not remotely rooted in the truth. We just simply channel our anger in different ways. Again, this speaks to tactics. Also, I must say for the record, I am hugely anti-fascist, and I am also an opponent of Antifa. Now, does that make me human garbage?
I knew that. No.
Well, I mean, I'm glad to hear that.
So. I don't understand how you can be on our side. It's kind of that agree to disagree thing. That's what made me think of it and made me call. I haven't called up to now because I didn't know what to say. But it's that agree to disagree thing. And I guess I'm still butthurt over all the talk I'm hearing about us woke people being mean and we need to stop. I really am butthurt about that.
Okay,
because I feel like I'm justified in my anger.
The reason I kind of want to park when I hear a point is because I'm trying to address this point. I'm not trying to walk all over you. I'm trying to hit this one step at a time. Okay. I see Antifa essentially excusing violent and lawless behavior, which is in the larger picture counterproductive to the cause of defeating fascism. I don't agree with the tactics or the attitudes expressed by these members of Antifa who are going out. I think that is not how you defeat fascism. Again, you and I disagree in terms of tactics, but we agree very much.
Antifa's a mentality, though.
It is. I mean, there's a spectrum, certainly, but when I see Antifa's tactics in whatever form, in whatever geographic location, it is almost always destructive in some way. And I don't think that's how we defeat fascism. And there's this narrative, well, you got to get in the gutter, and if they're monsters, then we have to become monsters to defeat them, etc. I do not hold to this philosophy.
Yeah.
I understand rage and frustration. I don't think we become them to defeat them. I just don't. And so we disagree on tactics, okay? But when I speak about woke culture, I am not saying that we shouldn't be fierce advocates for social justice issues and that we should fight with everything we have to be advocates for those who have been oppressed, who are suffering, be it for whatever reason. I'm simply saying that there are some people who have taken that to such a degree, and the enemy is extremism. I'm not a supporter of extremist behavior because in most cases, I think those become counterproductive. And in some ways, they become dogmatic. There are shades of my political philosophy, the left, right? I'm liberal. There are shades of liberals who become so extreme that they are like a cult. They're a purity test. And if you don't do this, and if you don't support Antifa, and if you don't follow all of these specific rules, if you're not 100% on their side, they will other you and they will put you in league with the enemy.
Right.
This is just tribalism.
Canceled. You get canceled.
This is just tribalism.
I get that.
So I'm just an opponent of extremism. I think, though, in terms of our values, you and I probably are pretty close to each other. I mean, wouldn't you think?
Yes, but you're way nicer on the spectrum. I'm at the total, like you're way over here in the Mr. Rogers land, and I'm way over here in the Joker land. You know what I mean? So it's hard for me sometimes to not take it personally because I am so far on the other side of the spectrum. Yeah. I was raised mean. I'm a mean person. I know that about myself. A lot of people that are my friends, they know that about me.
Now, hang on.
A lot of them like it.
I got to stop you again. Hang on. Are you just passionate and you're angry because you see injustice being done? Because that's one thing. And I get that.
Yes, but a lot of people call that mean.
Okay.
And I will jump down somebody's throat if I see injustice or cruelty or whatever.
Okay, but
I'm the type that will jump in and stop it.
Are you mean for the sake of being mean and nasty to other people? Do you revel in being mean?
Never. Sometimes. If the person's a really scummy person, yes, I guess I do revel in it. But for the most part, no. It's a reaction to something that's happening, and I've learned how to be like a chihuahua. A chihuahua thinks it's a pit bull. I have that kind of mentality when I'm going at it with somebody. I don't stop to think. I don't care if the guy's 6'10" or whatever. I'm going to go at him with the same veracity that somebody who's 2'2".
Now, what's your end zone? Like, what's the goal when you go at somebody? And I'll continue this conversation because I think it's compelling. If I like to say about my little dog.
Honestly, Seth, the goal is I want a world where people can look around and see good. That we're not being, especially here in Michigan, that is really hard to find. Michigan is a very mean state. I want different. Why do we have to be so mean? Why can't we care about each other? I asked my landlord, did you eat today? And he goes, what the fuck do you care? And I said, dude, I care because not caring feels like crap. I don't like feeling like crap. So is it selfless? Probably not, because caring about people makes me feel better about myself. It helps me sleep at night. It helps me look in the mirror when I'm getting ready in the morning, I don't like this crazy crap that's going on, and this anger and this hatred and these threats and the having to worry about the militias coming to get us, because I know how big our militias are and I know how dangerous they are. They always have been. And in this state, we seem to hold the militias up. And
I live in Oklahoma. Look, I get it.
Boggles my brain.
I get it. Like, guns are almost another member of the household in this state. I mean, I understand. I resist this blanket statement about the entire freaking state of Michigan. I know there are wonderful
Michigan's pretty
people.
Bad, Seth.
I know that there are many wonderful
There are
people.
little pockets of good. I will grant you that. There are pockets of good.
All right.
But in general, overall, this state is backwards, and we're kind of sick.
All right. Well, I'll let the Michigonites
and I know
who
you're
are
in
listening.
Oklahoma. You got the same problems there too.
I'll let the Michigonites sort of comment and validate or invalidate. I'm not a citizen. I'm not a resident of Michigan. So, at the end of the day, though,
I have no doubt most Michiganders are going to back me up on this. They know how bad it is here.
All right. Look, at the end of the day, I just want to encourage you. I know this may not resonate because, as you say, I live in Mr. Rogers land, but I don't think a continually raging life is a healthy one. I think you will dissolve from within if your default is constant rage. My encouragement would be, and we all get indignant and angry and pissed off, and rightfully so, about the injustices in the world. I hope you find some joy. Like, life's short. I hope you have some things that bring you goodness and joy in your life. Please tell me this is the case. I will tell you
there is some light. There is some light, Seth. You guys have been talking about how the anger does wear off. And I was very frustrated because I've been an atheist for 5 years now, and I've been still just as pissed off as I was at day one. 2 days ago, I decided, against my better judgment, to watch the Dolly Parton special on Netflix. And from the time I was 12 years old until I was almost 40, Dolly Parton was mommy in my heart, imaginary mommy. And when I became an atheist, I immediately hated her. I stopped listening to all of her music. Anything I had with her on it, I got rid of. I hated her because I felt like she helped propagate Christianity on me. She made it easier for me to believe that it was true. And watching that special, my heart melted where Dolly Parton was frozen at. And all of the memories of the love came back. And it's the first time in 5 years that some of that anger went away. And I was kind of shocked. And again, I thought of you and Matt Dillahunty because you guys said it and you kept saying it. And it actually happened for the first time. So progress is happening.
One day at a time, my friend, right? Let's
Yeah, just tell them it might take 5 years.
Come on. You and I, let's do battle against the evil in this world, and let's do our best to try to never close our eyes to the good. Let's just keep your eyes open out there, and I have every confidence that you will find some good. You'll find some encouragement. You will find a reason to keep kicking. Okay. And in the meantime, I appreciate your candor and your honesty, and I receive your words, and let me chew on all of that. And I promise you, I'll take a thoughtful approach to the positions that you've made and the points that you've made here on the call. Okay.
Thank you, Seth. Have a great day.
Okay. Thanks for calling. I appreciate you. We're just getting warmed up. We're going to continue our conversation about agreeing to disagree right after this. So I've been doing video greets on Cameo for special occasions or whatever occasions. People nominate somebody. Hey, my wife's got a birthday, or it's our wedding anniversary, or so-and-so just graduated from college or whatever, and we'd like you to send them a shout out. And I'm able to do that via cameo.com. You just type in my name, Seth Andrews, and it's just a few bucks. It helps to fund my work. And then I get to send them a personalized one-on-one video greeting. Hi, this is Seth, and I just wanted to say hi. And then I'm able to sort of address whatever's going on. It is a blast. It is so much fun. And if you'd like something like that for somebody in your own life, I would be honored to be able to do it. I appreciate the support. All you have to do is go to cameo.com and then type in my name, Seth Andrews. talking on this broadcast about when it's appropriate to agree to disagree. We go back to take more of your phone calls. 360, hi. Thanks for waiting. Who's this?
Hi, this is Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for waiting on me. What do you have for us today?
Okay, so I guess I think this was a good topic to call in on. I've been listening to you for a while now, and I'm kind of in a weird middle place when it comes to figuring out how to agree to disagree. I was raised very conservative, very Christian, and I've kind of spent I've spent my whole life kind of trying to come out of that because it didn't fit who I am, but really the last few years kind of realizing I could. And me and one of my 7 siblings are kind of both on the outside of this now and talking about it a lot. And we're both stuck on how to talk to our mom about how we feel about politics and Christianity at this point. We were raised with a very strong focus on end times theology, which is a challenge right now because it sort of fits a lot of the division and everything that's going on. My mom's one of those Trump supporters who started out with, I don't like the way he talks, and he's kind of harsh, he's kind of mean, and he's got this bad past, but, he's also going to save us from socialism and the decline of, American values and all of that. And I've had some conflict with her recently in trying to start talking about these topics. I think it's always harder to talk to the people that we love in some ways. And I guess I'm torn between sort of a pragmatic approach of realizing that a lot of times people are so set in their ideas that coming at them with your definition of why their ideas are bad is not going to help because they're sort of stuck in their own, and realizing, just like people are saying, that there are ideas that are objectively more harmful than others, and they're currently doing a lot of damage. And I guess my biggest thing is it's hard to know how to start. So I'm trying to do it one conversation at a time. And that's kind of where I'm at, is I can't change much. I can change one idea at a time, maybe,
It's difficult to watch, though. It's kind of like watching the death of a friend when you see people that you care about married to such toxic ideas. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yep, completely. I mean, does it ever get easier when you have that emotional connection to have more resilience when you're having those conversations, as opposed to sort of responding in the emotion of the relationship to kind of have a more logical conversation? I don't know. It hasn't yet.
I have been at my worst in those conversations when I get emotional. I've spoken, and they're quoting scripture, and again, I'm like, you're quoting the Talking Animals book, right? So I'm shouting.
Yeah.
I can think of a specific phone call, and it was my mother and I, and we were shouting at each other. We were nobody was making headway. We both doubled down and reinforced, and nothing was actually being communicated. There was nothing meaningful happening except shouting, just white noise. And, I'm not at my best when I get worked up. When the emotional buttons have been pressed, that's when I tend to, react in that visceral way, and I'm shouting. And I just don't think that minds are changed by that. I think, something else has to happen. I also think that it's important not to waste our time with people who are doxastically closed, who are not interested. They are sending, not receiving. I think we counter them, but I don't think we spend too much of our time on people who are absolutely not listening. I'm more interested at this point, at least in my own activism, in people who are somewhat curious, and they will listen to what you're saying. And they're interested in maybe even changing their minds if presented with better information. As far as the family thing, I wish I had the answer. Sadly, I haven't been able to solve the problem in my own life. All I can do is encourage you that you're not alone, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for calling. We'll see you later.
Yep. Bye.
I saw a guy in the chat room who said that I am the worst kind of moderate. Let me look up and see that. I hear a lot of this whenever I say that I don't condone violence. Seth's the worst kind of moderate, the kind who'd rather wring his hands and ask why the world is burning than lift a finger to put out the flames. And again, this is a straw man. It's another sort of an example of extremism. What they're saying is that if you're not throwing the Molotov cocktail, right, if you're not swinging your fists in the streets, if you're not throwing the bricks, if you're not burning it all down, then you simply want to play nice, that you're not troubled enough to actually do anything, that you're not on the side of right and justice, right? If you're not an extremist like me, well, you can't be an advocate for your fellow human beings in any meaningful way. You aren't going to be effective in any way. You're just going to sit around and have this wistful fantasy, this kumbaya fantasy of everybody buying each other a Coke and teaching the world to sing. It's total straw man. We don't disagree that oppression and bigotry and fascism and racism and religious oppression, etc., are horrible. We don't disagree on that. We disagree how to fix it. I come back again to an example I take inspiration from. Dia Khan. She's not an atheist. She's a Muslim. I've talked about her a lot. I'm going to mention her again. She sat in the living room of white supremacists, people who are ready for bottles and bricks to be thrown at them on the street. They like that, right? They're ready for that. What they weren't ready for was a flesh and blood human being of color, of the Muslim faith, to sit 5 feet from them in their living room and ask them basic questions about humanity. And after those conversations, several of the white supremacists announced that they could not hate her, and they left the hate group outright, and some of them are advocates helping other people escape white supremacy. Now, don't tell me conversation doesn't work. Don't tell me we can't defeat bad ideas with better ideas. And don't tell me that Dia Khan would have been more effective if she'd gone out to a fucking Klan rally and thrown bricks at white supremacists. She found a tactic that dismantled them, it disarmed them, it humanized everything, and it changed everybody's life. I just don't think we're going to sucker punch our way into a better world. Doesn't make me weak. It doesn't make me an advocate of Nazis or white supremacists or fascists or whatever else. It means we disagree in terms of tactics. How to change the world? You ain't going to do it with a freaking milkshake. I hold to that. We disagree in terms of tactics. And many of the extremists are actually damaging the cause that they are supposedly advocating for. I'm not at my best when I get emotional. I'm not at my best when I get emotional. I'm sorry. 602. Been waiting for almost an hour. Thanks for waiting. Who's this?
This is Stephen in Arizona. Good morning, Seth.
Somebody who's not from Michigan. How's it going, my friend?
Not from Michigan, no. Good. There's been so much that's been said that's been sort of like shifting what I was going to say, but I think you brought it back around with what you just said about Dia Khan. I think, well, first of all, about agreeing to disagree, I do have a purity test. In terms of when I cut people off, as in you're out of my life and I'm done with you. And it comes from the idea of exposure. And what you just described was the ability to expose people who don't have the information to a real person, a real live person in front of them who is not a threat, who is a real person that they can get to know. And, you know, when you first started speaking today, we're talking about the Pledge of Allegiance. When I moved to Europe in the 90s, my Dutch friends didn't believe the Pledge of Allegiance really existed until they asked me to recite it. And that was really eye-opening as well, because to not be in an environment where that was a norm, you really hear the words and hear what you're saying, and you're like, holy crap, that's what I was doing every morning. And I mean, I was the kid in middle school who was on the loudspeaker leading the school in the Pledge of Allegiance. So, you know, but I just kind of said the words, and then I was like, what am I actually saying? And as part of living there, I got to go to the Anne Frank house. I went to graduate school in Amsterdam. And I went there about 6 months after I moved there. And, Anne Frank was Jewish, and her first language was Dutch. And I got to see her actual diary, her journal, and it was open to a page where it was her first Christmas, because they never celebrated Christmas because she was Jewish, and the people that were hiding her were Catholic. And to read it and to understand it in her words, even though she wasn't there, was so moving to me that I could hear this teenager's voice in my head as I read her words. And I wasn't translating because I was reading it in Dutch. The exposure piece of it is so important. And I think what we struggle with in the United States are these bubbles. It's beyond media because religion plays a role in it, which we could talk about for a long time. But I think, to your point, and to go back to what I said about the purity test, I am a white person. I am LGBT. I've known people who've had abortions. When I present my arguments or my positions to those on the other side of the aisle from me, which I consider Republican at this point, and I'm like, you know me, and if you can still vote against me and my interests, then there's no place for you in my life. And that is my level of purity test. I don't think I'm as extreme as what you were intending to describe, but I definitely have that because I feel like agree to disagree is tax policy. Agree to disagree is not human rights, is not civil rights within this country. I don't think a 12-year-old boy playing in a park in Ohio should be shot instantly by police officers arriving on the scene just because he was black. I don't think that my niece, who is in her early 20s, should be saddled with a baby if she's not ready for one, if that's her choice. I would support her either way, but it is her choice. So when we come down to these discussions, and it's, I had a discussion with a friend of mine who, I was telling her about when I go out with my partner and I hold his hand in public, I have to worry about offending someone who might shoot me for being who I am. And I said to her, you don't have to worry about that, do you? And you never will, as a white woman holding your white boyfriend's hand. You will never have to worry about that because you're a normal, in quotes, person, where I have to worry about that. I have to worry about if I wear a pride shirt and draw too much attention to myself. And I've been harassed in the last 4 years, and I'm 50. And when it first happened, I couldn't believe it was happening. I was in Home Depot, and there's a lot of lesbians in Home Depot. You just don't expect these things. So, but I was in. I'm sorry, but I was.
Sorry.
I was
the
at
line
the,
caught me by surprise.
Sorry.
Yeah,
but I was at the cash register and I was asking a question about a refrigerator I had ordered, and there were two men behind me holding bricks, not because they were intending to use them on me, but they were just buying bricks. And they made some remark about me being a drama queen. And I was bent over the register with the girl, so they couldn't tell how tall I was. And then I stood up, and they only came up to my chin. But these were adult men, and I was like, "This is whatever year it was, 2018 or 2019," and I was like, "This is happening now, and I'm almost 50, and this is I'm being harassed for being gay in a Home Depot. How is this even happening?" And, I've had to point it out to people who are my friends who claim to care about me. And even with family, my family, my great-grandmother was a very non-confrontational, everybody get along kind of person. So nobody confronted each other on anything anybody did, which was a whole other story in itself. But I refuse to live like that. If you're abusing me or abusing someone I care about, you're going to hear it from me. And it's to your previous caller, it's not a matter of being mean. It is a matter of being passionate. But my feeling is and where I think the violence comes from is there's a feeling, a very human need for punishment or accountability or some price to pay for what strife or conflict you are causing. I mean, in terms of the current occupant of the White House, we have the ability to vote him out. And for some of us, that's going to be enough. For others of us, we want to see him go through the legal system and be dressed to match his face and be in prison. So, there's that. Yeah. But at the same time, for me, it's you are to be shunned. If you have a bad idea that is victimizing other people, you deserve to be shunned. One of the reasons I went to graduate school in Europe is I took a course in my senior year of undergraduate on the history of the American West, and I learned about the genocide of the Native Americans and the forced hysterectomies and all of these things that we did that I had never learned in my K through 12 education. And so I wanted to look at the United States from the outside and really get a feel for what other people saw in our country, and get just see what other history was out there, because it just clearly wasn't being taught until this one class. And then to find that we're doing this again. And with the women in Georgia who were held by ICE, by that one doctor, that we're doing it again. And the idea that we seem to lack this historical knowledge. I mean, when you go to Europe, the World War II is or at the time, it was 25 years ago now, but to be in Europe, the World War II history was very present in the psychology of everyone that I met, particularly the Germans. But I lived in the Netherlands. There was a lot of stuff there. And, of course, the Anne Frank house. And when you're faced with it and you look at it, I don't know if you've ever been there, but the exhibit is amazing. And just to realize that was history right there, of what was going on. And like I said, to read her words was just amazing. We seem to lose that here. I mean, I was thinking about political correctness 30 years ago when that term first sort of came into use. And it was really just the idea of treating each other with respect. So it was an awareness of how certain forms of humor, certain forms of idiomatic language was abusive to other people. It was not about saying you're wrong. It was about saying you can be better. You weren't aware that this was happening. Now we're telling you so you can be better. And now we have so many siloed information sources that it becomes incumbent on each of us to present our own truth or present our own knowledge. And that's why I say, if I say that to someone, and they're still going to vote against me, they're going to vote to put in more justices that will take away my rights, the rights of my sister and my niece and other women that I love, of people in other religions in favor of a Christian nationalist agenda, that's a problem. And the only nonviolent way I can say we can do something about it is to shun them. Because I don't believe laws do anything. I think we've seen in Europe and right now in Armenia and Azerbaijan that when you have an autocratic state or any kind of state that has laws against these things but don't address the underlying problem of ethnic strife or religious strife or whatever it is to really make that peace, as soon as those controls come off or they're even loosened a little bit, you end up with violence. We can look at it in Kosovo. We can look at it in Bosnia. We can look at it in Rwanda and now Armenia and Azerbaijan. And it's scary and it's sad because I also feel like what I'm saying is so totally weak because it overstates my importance to people that I decide to shun them, so that's going to change them. Okay. But at the same time, I feel like it's the only sane way through for me.
All right, let me jump in.
To say you're out of my life.
Let me jump in here. I mean,
Sure.
I'm doing longer calls on this broadcast, but I'm of the opinion that the calls are as long as they need to be, and if that means we go 15 minutes or whatever, then fine. You and I agree, I think, about boundaries. I think there are times when you set a guideline, and if you're going to discriminate, if you're going to dehumanize, if you're going to work against the things I care the most about, I'm going to remove you from my circle. I get that. I totally understand that. I'm not sure I totally agree that the laws don't matter. I know that laws don't change opinions. Like, you can pass the anti-racism law, and it doesn't mean that racism goes away. But if you make it legal for LGBT people to enjoy the benefits of marriage, that then opens the doors for them to be able to have that union, which helps in a way to more normalize it. It's a slow, long game, but I think the laws can make a difference. Am I misguided in that?
No, I understand your point, but then I don't know if you heard what our revered Justices Alito and Thomas stated this week.
Yeah.
That causes a lot of fear in my community, and Judge Barrett does not look like she's going to vote to maintain the current status quo. Rights should not be a cha-cha of, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It shouldn't be like that. I have friends who are looking at leaving the country if the election goes a particular way. I have friends who are planning to elope. They weren't even sure they wanted to get married, but because of prior decisions and them not really being able to undo marriages that have taken place, they're looking to assert that right, even if they're not entirely sure about the partner, which is a whole other discussion. But that's frightening. I'm not looking to deny, I think I'm an atheist as well, and, I think religious people are delusional, and I feel sorry for them, but I'm not telling them not to continue to believe their delusions. I'm just telling them not to hurt other people with it. If you want to believe what you want to believe inside your own home, inside your own places of worship, go for it. But don't tell me I can't have a marriage. Don't tell me I can't stay in this hotel. Don't tell me I can't eat at this restaurant. And it's not just, there's a case right now coming up from South Carolina where an evangelical group was allowed to discriminate against anyone who wasn't evangelical, and they got a waiver from the federal government for it. So that's dangerous and problematic. It's not just my group.
I get it. I get your larger point. I don't mean to jump in. We've spent a lot of time.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of segues. You're like me. You're a stream of consciousness communicator. So you and I could probably have coffee and enjoy the whole evening of speaking together. I totally get you. I totally understand. And I'm so thankful for your position. I totally understand. I want you to know I've taken a couple of things away from this call beyond the larger and serious points that you've made. I know now there are a lot of lesbians at Home Depot, and I am stealing the phrase that rights should not be a cha-cha. That is something I want to put on a T-shirt, right? 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Whatever that cha-cha is, that's a great line. And for what it's worth, by watching the people here in the chat as I see it sort of scroll up, I try to gauge it as best I can. I know I and a great many people in the audience, if we were standing with you, I'd like to think we would have stood up and stood alongside you against the discrimination you faced. I'm sorry we live in that world, but, there are some of us out there who we do have your back. I hope that provides some measure of encouragement. Okay?
It does. Thank you very much, and thanks for taking my call.
It's an honor to speak with you. Thanks a bunch.
Bye-bye.
Rights should not be a cha-cha. He was talking about the Pledge of Allegiance and how he went to Europe and they were like, no, you actually recite a pledge to be allegiant. I enjoy the pledge now because you can have conversations about it to people. You're like, all right, fine. What's a republic? And they just cock their head like a dog. Like you just pledged allegiance to the republic, right? And to the republic for which it stands. What's a republic? And they have no idea. They just pledged allegiance to something that they cannot define. Who wrote the Pledge of Allegiance? Did you know it was a socialist? I wrote about this in Confessions, right? Francis Bellamy was a Christian socialist. He wanted to eliminate all class systems. I'm sorry, with the scare word of socialism being bandied about by the evangelical right, when you tell them that the Pledge of Allegiance they get so freaked about was written by a socialist, they just spontaneously combust. Who wrote? Or they think the founding fathers wrote the pledge. You realize the pledge was written over 100 years after the Declaration of Independence was signed? Did you realize under God wasn't added until the mid-20th century? During the Cold War? They have no idea. They have no idea. It's just this cultural thing that caught fire. It was written in a youth newspaper. And, I now see the Pledge of Allegiance. There was an oath in Hitler's Germany. Now, I try not to invoke Hitler too much because some people immediately check out. For them, it's a conversation stopper, and they say, Godwin's law, blah, blah, but I don't necessarily hold to that. I think sometimes you have to make the parallel. You can use Hitler as Jesus Christ. He was the biggest tyrant, arguably, of the 20th century. We can talk about him and relate, okay? The oath of Hitler's Germany, the loyalty oath said, I swear I will be faithful and obedient to the leader of the German Reich and people, Adolf Hitler, to observe the law and to conscientiously fulfill my official duties, so help me God. Now tell me that our pledge doesn't ring a little bit like that pledge. And I'm just not convinced that rote recitation of a loyalty oath to a nation, right or wrong, that's not a healthy thing. If my loyalty is to anything, it's to the truth and to goodness and justice. That's where my loyalty ought to be, not to a subjectively defined set of borders. That's just me. More calls to come. I got a short break. I'll be right back as we continue the conversation next. My patrons get this show totally commercial-free, and they get it 2 days early. Thanks for your support at patreon.com/Seth Andrews. We're talking here about when it is and isn't appropriate to agree to disagree. What do you think? 716, hi, who's this?
Hey, Seth, it's Claire from Buffalo. I am so glad you had this podcast this morning. Disagree to disagree. For many months, when people would post just absolutely, totally unfactual things, I would say, oh, well, here's a link to this, and this is why this is impossible, like, CO2 will kill you in your mask or whatever. And, invariably the response is, oh, my gosh, the response is not, oh, I didn't know that. The response is fake news, deep state, blah, blah. So I stopped trying to argue with people. And and there are certain people I love dearly. They post their political stuff. I don't comment on it anymore, and they don't comment on my political stuff. But here's where I draw the line. When they post something racist, like my cousin, this picture of Obama as a monkey, unfriended immediately.
Yeah, I get that. I've done that. I mean, somebody's online and I see something horrible that they say or do or represent. I'm like, life's too short. Yeah. Click. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, if it's racism or homophobia or intolerance, again, I let them know it, and they're out of my life. I'm done trying to argue with people. I'm done screaming at people. But as soon as you start bullying other people, I'm up in your face because I've never been able to sit still for bullying. So,
well, I think that's something we should probably all aspire to, right? If we see someone who is being oppressed in the moment, yeah, we stand up and we stand against whatever that means. I get that.
Anyway, I just wanted to thank you for having this on this morning because I was full of anxiety and and then hearing all of your wonderful guests and you and everybody, it helped bring me down from the walls.
Enhance your calm. Breathe. Breathe. Thank you so much for calling. You take care, all right?
Thanks. Bye, Seth.
I had someone send me a message. This is a quick diversion. But they said, have you considered doing voice stuff for a website called Calm. I don't know if it's ASMR stuff or if you're reading certain texts, but I guess there's a website that is just supposed to relax you. It's called Calm, and you can submit things where so I mean, I take that as a tremendous compliment. Apparently she was calmed by my voice or my cadence or whatever it was. Calm, right? Everybody be calm. Breathe in, breathe out. Be calm. 423, hi. Who's this?
Hi, Seth. How are you today?
I'm good. Crystal. Here in Mr. Rogers land, hanging out with my dogs. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I think, Seth, we are kindred spirits, so to speak. I'm very much into the idea of there are good people in the world. Majority of the world, I believe, are good people, and they have decent ideas or intentions, rather. And so my friend and I, she is actually a Trump supporter, and we've had a discussion just recently about agreeing to disagree on some things. And she does have good intentions with her voting because she thinks, that he made our country better economically or whatever. And that's the point where we agree to disagree. But other than that, she understands that he's misogynist or misogynistic, and that he can sometimes be, racist or whatever. And we've had those discussions too. And we, on those points, do not agree to disagree because, like you've said and other callers have said, it's not okay to agree to disagree on human rights.
That's a tough pill to swallow, probably, when you see a friend who's enabling a racist.
Exactly. And we've had multiple discussions on it. And she, of course, follows Fox News and believes that a lot of it's fake and that people are just out to attack the president, So we have to stop, and just stop ourselves at that point before we destroy the friendship. But what I try to do with people like her is to see their heart and their intentions and move beyond the things that they're voting for, the people that they're voting for, because I know for her religion has a lot to do with it, and that conservative mindset that she has a lot to do with it. So I try to move past that with her, and we focus on things like what we do have in common, and our love for each other. It's not easy to do, but it is doable to have a relationship with these people that differ from you.
I'm interested, too, in, is there any possibility for education if we sort of sneak it in? Here's a great example. I'm not a socialist, right? Overtly a socialist. I'm sort of, there are a lot of gears in my economic machine, so to speak, but I am a proponent of democratic socialism. So I know that socialism has been used as a scare word by the current administration, and people like my Fox News watching family will hear that and flip out, right? It's immediate. It's a trigger word. They lose their minds. Holy shit, it's socialism. And so, I'm like, well, how do you feel about public schools? How do you feel about public libraries? How do you feel about driving on roads? How do you feel about police and fire? I mean, these are all socialist, democratic socialist programs. They are part of a society, part of how we fund and fuel and make the infrastructure of our civilization work. This is a socialistic endeavor. And I've been able to make a little bit of inroads with them on that. They refuse to actually admit that these are, in any way socialistic programs, but I can see the wheels turning. I can see that little sort of cognitive dissonance, and then occasionally they shift, and I wonder if they're thinking about it later on. Do you ever try those tactics where you sort of maybe take a different angle and ask them a question that puts them on the spot?
Oh, absolutely. And, sometimes there's backpedaling, and then sometimes there's, well, let's look into that a little more because I think you might have, you might be onto something,
Or they just blink at us and go, well, I disagree. And we have to agree to disagree.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. But I think there's all types of activism, and some people are that militant, go out and do things and call people names kind of activist, and I don't really agree with that. But the do things part, sure, but I'm not a verbal attacker. I'm more of a let's talk about things, and I want to hear your point of view, and I'm going to give you mine, and let's try to come to some kind of compromise, some kind of middle ground.
It doesn't mean you're not angry, though, right? I mean, you in your bones feel real anger about the injustice of the world, and this idea that because your tactic is to actually operate in the arena of ideas, you're trying to change minds. It doesn't mean that you're not fueled by kind of an absolutely right and just indignation and anger about the insanity of the world, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I have friends that are Black and people of color, and I'm white, and, we've had discussions, and I'm like, yeah, I'm angry. I can only imagine how angry you are right now. That's the kind of stuff that fuels me. Like, I want to do good with my anger, if that makes sense. I'm not the kind of person that is going to become violent because I'm angry. I want to use my anger to fuel my activism in a positive way.
I like the sound of that. Anger can be a healthy motivator, and taken to the extreme, I think it can rot you from within. It can be oppressive. Before you know it, you suffer emotionally, psychologically, physically. Anger can be a healthy motivator, but if taken to the extreme and it's constant, nonstop, I really think it just destroys us from within. That's no life. It's not a good life. We have one life. Do we really want to spend every waking moment nasty, bitter, angry, shouting, tense, and not enjoying some of the good stuff that's out there? I don't think that means we're turning a blind eye. It just means we recognize that life is short, right?
Right, exactly. And there are better ways to reach people. And I think you made a good point earlier that a lot of people are not going to be reached when you're shouting at them. They're not going to open their minds when you're calling them names or shutting down their ideas. You've got to reach people on their level. You've got to, slow down and take a deep breath and say, okay, this is what I believe. This is why I believe you're wrong. Let's talk.
I wonder if this means that there is now another resident in Mr. Rogers' land, because it sounds like we might be neighbors. Would you be my neighbor?
Right, yeah. I think I am your neighbor. I live right up the road.
Hey, I appreciate you very much. Thanks for being a part of today's conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks, Seth. I hope you have a great day.
You too. Take care. I see one more call on the switchboard that's been waiting for an hour and 8 minutes. Let me get this call in because they've been so patient. 724. Hello, who's this?
This is Stan.
Hi, Stan. What's on your mind?
I just want to talk about the idea of agreeing to disagree. And I'm not going to get into all the political and all that other kind of stuff. I'm an atheist. In fact, I'm looking at a little book in my hand right now called The Atheist's Bible. And there's a little quote in here by Jonathan Swift. It says, difference in opinions has cost many millions of lives. For instance, whether flesh be bread or bread be flesh, whether the juice of a certain berry be blood or wine. Like I said, that's from Jonathan Swift. And this kind of gets to the point of agreeing to disagree. I mean, Seth, would you say that the point of agreeing to disagree would be more like, I've heard you talk about how an atheist might or might not help a Christian to see things differently. And my whole thing is you can get more lies with honey than with vinegar. So to me, the point of agreeing to disagree is to help people to see things your way without being mean and nasty about it.
I also think that in order for us to attract people to better ideas, we have to be attractive. If my position is so nasty and awful, it's almost like if you're an atheist activist and you're speaking to a religious person, but your tactic is one of nonstop toxicity and vitriol and shouting and, fuck God and blah. I mean, that's just nonstop. If I was a believer and that had been my impression of what atheism was, that would have totally turned me off, and it might have actually muted my own journey. I'd have become a little bit more wary of this whole idea of, whoa, what's an atheist? What is that about? The first atheists that I had come across that I knew about, atheist activists, were people who were reasonable and thoughtful and kind and strong, but they also loved to laugh, and they made good points, and they didn't make me feel stupid or threatened. And it was because of that I continued my journey into better ideas. And so I do think, if you are an awful person, if you're acting in an awful way nonstop, if you're just nasty all the time, do you really want that to be the impression other people have of you? And do you think that that's something they would want in their own lives? I think we have to show them at least a shade of the good stuff, right?
Yeah, and that's really just the point I make. I know that I'm probably going to be the last caller, and I'm not going to take much of your time because I know you've got other things to do.
You're great.
But just one more little thing I want to look at here is a quote by Thomas Jefferson. It says, "I never consider a difference of opinion in politics, in religion, in philosophy as cause for withdrawing from a friend." And that rings a bell with me. I mean, and then it goes along with what you just talked about too, and what we've been talking about, that it's okay to agree, disagree, but now there comes a point where you have to draw a line. And that line has to be drawn at the point of where disagreement becomes physical, becomes violent. And then, of course, you have to defend yourself at that point. But until it reaches that point, I think it's better to just try to attract flies with honey rather than vinegar, like we've been talking about.
All right. Let me think about that one for a minute. I appreciate you very much. Thanks so much for the call and the quotes.
Okay, thank you for this. No. Thanks for taking my call.
You
Bye.
bet. See you later. I mean, I've shut some people off. Part of me was like, I don't have to watch this. I don't have to listen to this. And I kind of want them to know that what they are doing and saying is upsetting to me and the antithesis of my value system, and I consider to be a moral atrocity, and life's too short. I can think of some opportunities, some times I've taken when I think, no, I'm going to draw that hard line in the sand. If you're going to be an awful person, you do it in your own zip code, man. I don't have to watch. I don't have to sit here and put up with this. And there have been occasions when I've said, well, let's agree to disagree. We dramatically disagree on this point, but I see enough worth salvaging around that point that I'm not ready to cut ties outright. That's a subjective decision, and only you and only I can decide where those lines are drawn, what those criteria are. And but I think if someone is toxic and breathing that toxicity into your specific space, and you decide you don't have to breathe it anymore, you don't want to breathe it anymore, I'm not sure I necessarily always agree with Thomas Jefferson on that quote. I think sometimes, show them the door, have a nice day, I don't have to listen to it. I don't have to watch it. I stand opposed to it. It's, it's a subjective decision that I think we all come to at various times in our lives. There are moments to agree to disagree, living around the disagreement in the hopes of celebrating what else we might have. And there are times to say, enough, I'm done, have a good day. I'm sure the comment sections will continue to chew on this very thick little question. Like, when do you agree to disagree? I'm so thankful for your calls, for your conversation, for this community. Be safe out there, my friends, and I'll see you next time.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter for a complete archive of podcasts and videos, products like mugs and t-shirts featuring the Thinking Atheist logo, links to atheist pages and resources, and details on upcoming free thought events and conventions. Log on to our website, thethinkingatheist.com.